This on? Cool. Hello, good afternoon. All right, welcome to this week's History is Lunch. Wait, is it on? Oh. Hello, good afternoon.
Testing. There you go.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to this week's History is Lunch. I'm Brittany Wilson with the two Mississippi Museums. We're glad to have you in our home, the Craig H. Neilsen Auditorium, in the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum and also the Museum of Mississippi History. I also want to welcome those on Facebook and YouTube. If you're watching online, remember that our programs remain available at any time to view. At this time, please silence your cell phones. We hope you will join us next Thursday morning, August 13th, for our Mississippi Made Stennis Space Center Gallery Talk at 11 a.m. in the Medgar and Merle Evers Exhibition Hall. We will have Rodney McKellop, Associate Director of NASA's Stennis Space Center, present our state's history and contributions to space exploration. Again, that will be next Thursday at 11 a.m. We continue our America 250 journey with a discussion about the behind-the-scenes process of our current exhibition, Mississippi Made. All right, and today we are delighted to welcome MDAH's own Nan Prince, Director of Collections, Jessica Walzer, Director of Curator of Collections and Exhibitions, and their conversation will be moderated by Drew Gardner, Director of Programs. Please welcome Nan, Jessica, and Drew.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad to have you guys here with us today. Nan and Jessica, thank you guys for coming and joining us. This is a unique chance to kind of take a look behind the scenes. A lot of folks get to see the hard work and labor that goes into the creation, the product of it, but don't actually get to hear about what all it took to make this happen. This is an incredible exhibit, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't been, I'd encourage you to make your way upstairs. This was a long time in the making. We'll talk a little bit about that, of how we got there and the work that it took. But one of the really incredible things about this is that this is an entirely in-house exhibit. As a matter of fact, it's really the third of 3 years of consecutive exhibits that this team has put together. If you guys have been around, you've seen maybe 2 years ago we did Flags from Mississippi. That was an in-house exhibit this team created. Last year, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, Mississippi Remembers, as we partnered with Melody Golding in that exhibit. And then Mississippi Made, as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the signing of Declaration of Independence and the role that the state of Mississippi has played in the not just the founding, but the products and the influence it's had on our nation. And so we get to take this kind of fantastic look at this. And so as we get started, Nan and Jessica, tell us just a little bit about what you do. Brittany, thank you for those introductions. That she told us a little bit about your titles, but tell us what you do here at MDH. And then let's take a step further, is how does that play into the creation of an exhibit like Mississippi Made? Nan, why don't you kick us off for us?
Can y'all hear me? All right. I'm Nan Prince. I'm Director of Collections for the Museum Division of the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. And my office basically collects and cares for, organizes, preserves all the artifacts in the historic objects collection. So for those of you who aren't familiar with MDAH, we have several different collections. Mine is historic objects. These are 3D collections. And then we have our Archives and Record Services collections, which are basically papers, photographs, audiovisual materials. And then we also have our archaeology collection. So these are three separate, but my collection, our collection, the Historic Objects Collection, we collect all 3D artifacts associated with Mississippi history. So total, we have about 25,000 artifacts in the collection. We provide the artifacts for all the museum division sites. So things that you see in the Eudora Welty House or the Old Capitol Museum, those are all part of our collection as well. Hello? Is that on? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't
don't know how to work the microphones. Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm the curator of collections and exhibits here at MDH, and I work under Nan as part of our historic object collection. And we do everything for the historic object collection, cataloging artifacts, and we do a lot of work with exhibits to put our artifacts on display. And I'm also really lucky that I get to work a lot with our exhibit team to research and write and pick artifacts for our temporary exhibits.
So we've got for those of you kind of unfamiliar to the museum process, we've got the curatorial services, which is this team that's combined of our collection staff and our exhibit staff. Talk to us, because you guys have done a huge work in the three-dimensional artifacts, and then Jessica, you especially, of getting those stories and the research that go behind it. Talk to us a little bit about the rest of the staff that maybe couldn't fit everybody on stage today, but you guys you've been here some of the longest and done some of the most kind of intense research of the artifacts. Tell us a little bit about some of the other staff who maybe would be here on stage with us, and tell us a little bit about some of the things that they do.
Yeah, so our curatorial team is made up of our collections and exhibit staff. Nan leads our collection staff. And we have an awesome exhibit team that has put a ton of work into this. Like Drew said, this is an all in-house exhibit, meaning everything from painting the walls, building temporary walls, printing the panels, all of that is done by our staff in-house, by our exhibit team. We have an awesome exhibit designer, Hannah Beatty. She's not here today, but everything in the exhibits that looks good is because of her. She does, picks fonts and colors, and she does the full designs and layouts and all of that kind of stuff. And I know Drew is here. Drew is our exhibit specialist, and he painted everything in the exhibit. He put so much work into it. I know he's here. And Sam Butts is our previous director of exhibits. He's now at the Natural Science Museum, but yeah, he did a lot of work for this too.
And John Gardner, who probably a lot of you know, I'm not sure what his title was, but I'm going to say exhibits guru. He retired this year, so Mississippi Made was John's last exhibit, and what an exhibit to go out on. He just built so much in there. And Drew, I like to say, Drew kept John alive during the building of the exhibits. You would often walk into while we were putting the exhibit up, and Drew would just be huddled around John while he was laying on the floor using the nail gun or drill or whatever. So John Gardner as well. And Katie Etrie is our conservator, who helped us get the artifacts ready, spent a lot of time conserving them. And then Hong Lee, our collections manager, and Yvette Ray, our director of curatorial services. So we've got a good team that really just came together to put this exhibit together.
It takes a lot of work to put an exhibit of this size. I mean, we're talking roughly 250 artifacts. You can notice the 250 theme there, with it being America 250. But to put 250 artifacts in a temporary exhibition is a whole lot of work. Talk to us a little bit about how long did this take? Because I've heard stories, but I'd like to hear, how long did it take from the concept of this exhibit to finally opening the doors this March? What was that process and timeline look like, Nan?
Well, we have been planning some sort of Mississippi-made exhibit for years. Even before we moved into this building in 2017, we knew we were going to have a Mississippi-made exhibit, but it just took a while to really wrap our heads around what this needed to look like, what artifacts are going to be in here, what path it was going to take. We also had other exhibits come up that we wanted to do as well. Our exhibit schedule is planned about 4 or 5 years ahead of time, so we have the next 4 or 5 years planned, and by the time we got Mississippi Made on the schedule, it ended up being 2026. So, and it worked out well because we were able to celebrate the nation's semi-quincentennial as well. And that's what brought the 250 artifacts in, is we planned 250 artifacts to celebrate America 250, but it was definitely a long time in the making. So we were glad to get it up this year.
Thinking about 250 artifacts on display, there are several hundred to almost 1,000 in our permanent exhibitions, about 10% of that 25,000 that's downstairs. If you guys haven't been, once a quarter we have a collections tour that's open to the public. We ask that you register because there is limited space. We've got the next one September 10th. That's a Thursday at 11 a.m. for those of you who haven't been, to go see some of those 25,000 objects. But Jessica, just talk to us. were all these objects that we have up there, those 250, did they all come from the MDH Historic Object Collection? And if not, where did they come from?
Yeah, so a lot of the artifacts in Mississippi Made are from our collection. Nan and I are always talking about how awesome our collection is. We have, thousands of artifacts that cover all aspects of Mississippi history. And one of the exciting things about doing this exhibit was that we could showcase some of the artifacts that we have that aren't on permanent display, that we can get to the public. And so probably at least 200 of them are from our collection. And then we had some topics that we knew we wanted to talk about, but are not reflected in our historic object collection. And we were able to source artifacts from other institutions across the state and beyond to get loans as well.
What are some of those objects? I know we've worked with a bunch of different institutions to get things here in the building. What are some of those objects that we got? Who are some of those partners we worked with?
Yeah, we have a lot of really cool things on loan. First one that pops in my head is, Jim Henson is obviously a very important entertainment figure from Mississippi. We have a couple little things in our collection. We have a songbook that's on display and some kind of commercial Kermits. But I was able to work with the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta to get a Muppet, a real Muppet. So we have the Fazoob. He's on display. If you haven't seen him, go see him. His name is cute, and he was on the Muppet Show. I'd also encourage, if you have seen him, to look up on YouTube the video of him from the Muppet Show. They're very cute. But things like that have been really exciting for us to get. That we don't have an original Muppet, but having one for this exhibit has been really exciting.
It's exciting to see how all of those things come together and make this happen. Nan, was there anything that just really made you excited? One of those artifacts that you were like, if we could have it in the collection. Obviously, we'd want it all probably if we could, but not everything belongs here. What was one of those things that we came across that we got to have a loan that was really exciting for you?
It's one of our newest artifacts is a Lindsay logging wagon, and it's an artifact that I've wanted for a long, long time. We've all wanted it. We just couldn't find one. And the Lindsay logging wagon was invented in 1899 by a man named John Lindsay. He lived in Sandersville, Mississippi. And he had a sawmill that had a lot of difficulty getting the timber that he would cut from out, where he would cut it to the sawmill, because, the land was very marshy, boggy. Y'all are all from Mississippi, you understand. So he had trouble getting these huge logs in with the normal 4-wheel wagon. So he invented an 8-wheel wagon, but it's actually in 2 different parts, so it could maneuver a little bit better, and just vastly changed the timber industry in Mississippi. And his brother found a way to mass produce these wagons. So the Lindsays established the Lindsay Wagon Company in 1900 in Laurel, Mississippi, and they were in business for about 50 years and made these wagons that went really all over the world, especially this country and in South America. And we wanted a Lindsay logging wagon bad when we were planning the exhibits for this museum. But one popped up a couple of years ago. I was just contacted by the Monroe County Historical Museum in Bloomington, Indiana, and they had a Lindsay logging wagon on display in their museum, but they were redoing the exhibits and were ready to deaccession it, to move it out of their collection, and asked if we wanted it. So of course we did. One of their volunteers loaded it up in a U-Haul and drove it up here, and we finally had our own Lindsay logging wagon. So we were very excited to be able to put it on display here. They think it was actually used in a quarry when it was in Indiana, so these wagons have many different uses. They were actually used in both World Wars, but it's a really fantastic artifact to have. It's huge if you haven't seen it. It's the first artifact you're going to see in the exhibit, but it's probably one of my favorite things in there.
Besides being one of your favorite things in there, it is, you mentioned it, when you walk in that exhibit, it's one of the first things you see. It's right there on the right-hand side wall as you walk in. But you notice there's just kind of this natural progression throughout the exhibit with these 4 pillars: industry, innovation, art, entertainment. The latter 2 are probably the more well-known. People, maybe our chief expertise in exports from Mississippi are entertainment and the art that we create here. But you guys decided when y'all were creating this to put industry and innovation as kind of your front too. And that Lindsay wagon is that great example of one of those first things you see when you walk in. Talk to me, why innovation and industry, and then why at the beginning? What was the thought behind that?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. Some as simple as it was kind of the industry was kind of the main topic we kind of all agreed on being one of the sections leading into it. It was kind of, industry was always kind of that first one for us. But I also think that it works really well as the first one because I think it kind of it's the section that I think impacts people's daily lives the most. So I think Mississippians coming in will be able to recognize a lot of those things and their work that has gone worldwide. And yeah, I think it's just kind of like more of a daily life thing. More people have contributed to that section. A lot of the later things in the exhibits are very specific to, certain people like music stars or things like that. But in industry, we're able to talk about the impact, people have working at the factories or, fishing or whatever it is. And I think innovation follows that quite well because I think they're quite intertwined. We kind of struggled with some things of like, should it be in industry? Should it be in art? Like things I think we could move some things around and they'd still make sense. Like the example I'm thinking of is the Masonite Company. We have a little magazine thing, a little ad advertising Masonite, which the company was founded in Mississippi, it was made in Mississippi. But like that could have easily gone in innovations because it was invented here because we have so many lumber mills, they had extra wood chips and pulp, and so they created this kind of pressed wood material. So like that could definitely also be an innovation. I think those are really tied together. So they go together nicely.
I like how those two spaces blend. Did you have something you want to add, Nan? Did you have something?
Oh, I did. On the industry, it also gave us a way to partner with different museums across the state as well. And one item I'm thinking about is the Soule steam engine, which the Soule Steam Company in Meridian made tons of steam engines that they really sent around the world. They were in business for a long time. And their factory is now a museum in Meridian. And if you've not been there, it's a really neat museum. And so we went there and the director showed us all around and he said, hey, I can loan you this little steam engine. And we're like, oh, great, the little steam engine that required a forklift to take out of their museum and to bring us into ours. But that just gave us another example to highlight another institution within the state and to bring a really neat artifact here.
As you walk through that space, you can't miss, there's the Nissan truck right there. But one of my favorite two things as you're walking through, and they're kind of bookend the corners of industry before you head into innovation. And they're probably the most just kind of normal things. And it's the Peaches booth and the Sun and Sand bar. A quick story, I moved to Jackson 15 years ago, and my roommate at the time took me to go eat lunch, and he took me to Fair Street, and we ate at Peaches. It was the first time I'd ever had chitlins before. But I think about those things, and they're normal everyday objects. For anybody that's been to those places, you would recognize them, and they wouldn't seem significant. But now they're in a museum. Now they're in this space that's maybe a little out of its original context. We try and create a scene, a space to kind of put it back in that space. But talk to us just as museum professionals. Part of y'all's job is how do we take these artifacts from daily life, and we share a story of significance. And give meaning to them as we kind of communicate to the public. Talk to me a little bit about of why is that important that we collect these things and we share those stories?
Well, I'll talk about the Sun and Sand. The Sun and Sand Hotel was a mid-century hotel right by the Capitol. I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with it, but it was just a place where a lot of the legislators would stay during the session. And to paraphrase Willie Morris, legislators would just gather in the dining rooms or in the bar, the Sun and Sand, and that's where the legislation was passed, and it was just formalized in the Capitol the next day. So I like to look at the Sun and Sand bar and think just what was discussed as they were just sitting around at that bar. What laws are we living under today that were made in that bar? And it actually came to us a few years ago. A lady bought it at auction when the Sun and Sand closed down, and she had it on her back porch, and she would just entertain on her back porch in the Sun and Sand bar. And so she was getting ready to downsize and just called us and said, do you want this? And we went and picked up the bar and the two bar stools and have our own little bit of Sun and Sand history there.
Yeah, and I think with the peaches, it's very similar. Like Drew, I love that you have your own story because that's what makes it special is that it was a place where people went to and it was part of their stories, their Mississippi stories. The Peaches is also a great example of a Mississippi-owned business, an original restaurant, and of course, food and drink is a big part of Mississippi culture, and so it's a great example of that. And I really love it in the exhibit. I love that we were able to use it. It's one of those artifacts that's kind of big and kind of difficult to use, but in this kind of big exhibit, we're able to use it. And our designer, Hannah, laid it out where we also have the Coke bottles and the Barks bottles on the booth. They're displayed, so they're separate artifacts, but they're displayed on the booth, which I really like, that we're able to connect this like very homegrown restaurant where everyone had their individual stories with the ways in which Mississippi is connected to major corporations like Coca-Cola being the first to bottle the drink in Vicksburg, obviously made that possible to spread it further around the world. Barks root beer is invented on the coast. So I really like that we are able to do that in a way that we can highlight this kind of very homegrown thing and tie it to these international corporations that are also have a lot of importance to Mississippi.
It's always cool to hear the stories of how these things came to us. In 2027 will be 125 years that Mississippi Department of Archives and History has existed and been actively collecting. I think that's the piece. I know for me, as a teacher before I ever came, it was always this kind of mythical idea of what do they have? What's there? I think the most I knew at the time was probably the dummy mummy. But I look at it, and so much of the story is this is an active thing. These aren't old stories that we're just have been collecting dust. There is an active pursuit of collecting these objects. Why is that important that we continue for that 25,000 number to grow? Why is that important?
I think the objects tell our history, they tell our story, they present to people in the future what it was actually like today, and the daily stuff like the Coke bottles and the restaurant booths just show a way of life. So, and that's why we continue to collect. We actually have a collections committee that meets once a month to discuss all potential acquisitions. I would estimate that we really take in about half of the artifacts that are offered to us. When they're sent to us, we kind of compare to what we already have in the collection and decide if we need to bring it in or not. But I think this is just a way to preserve our history. It kind of brings it alive, at least for people like us who like artifacts. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think that also it gives us a way to help the public interact with the history. It's really important when we do exhibits. Obviously, this exhibit, Mississippi Made, is very artifact heavy. I like to think of it as kind of like a spotlight exhibit where we kind of feature various things through the artifacts. But beyond that, we're always looking for more stories to be able to tell. I think we'll probably talk more about how did we pick what went in the exhibit, why were some things not in the exhibit, and continuing to collect. It allows us to expand to include the stories that we aren't able to tell through artifacts now. So.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece, that if you have or know of things that you notice are missing, this is not a just tell us that we missed it. Come help us find it. And we know we may not always be the right place for it, but we'd love to make sure those things are taken care of and those stories are preserved as we look at that. And so if you have some of those things or know of some of those things, come and see us afterwards. And Ann and Jessica would be happy to help you guys answer some of those questions and point you in the right direction. Jessica, you've done a ton of research in this exhibit. As we were talking on the front end, you just named story after story after story. And one of the ones that really struck me that you kind of lit up on when we were first talking about this program is we started to talk about kind of the medical kind of piece. You step into that innovation and you see Dr. James Hardy and you see Dr. Arthur Guyton. And alone, those two could probably fill the entirety of innovation in Mississippi Made if we just focused on those two individuals. Generally, folks probably know of Dr. Hardy. They know of the transplant. They have some knowledge there. But maybe I'm familiar with Dr. Guyton. Tell us just briefly a little bit about his story, significance, how you decided what he was going to have on display, because it's a really interesting kind of piece that maybe is a little unfamiliar to folks?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Drew knows this is one of the topics where when my friends and family came to see the exhibits that I just, went on and on about. But so I'll use the opportunity. Dr. Guyton is from Oxford, Mississippi. He went to study at Harvard, and he served in the U.S. Navy. He was doing, in his final year of his surgical residency, he was paralyzed from polio. And so he ended up switching where he wouldn't be able to do the surgical residency, the surgical path that he wanted to. He turned to physiology, and he went to the University of Mississippi, and he taught pharmacology there. And then when they created UMMC in Jackson, he moved down here and was the chair of the physiology department. And he's fascinating. Yeah, everyone knows Dr. Hardy, but Dr. Guyton is also really fascinating in a lot of ways. When he first became paralyzed, he worked to do a lot of really cool innovations for handicapped people in hospitals, like transferring to beds. He was the first one to use a joystick to control a wheelchair, lots of cool things like that. And he went on to write the textbook of medical physiology, which is like most widely used medical textbook of all time. And so anyone that has a medical degree, I guarantee has had his book. And, my favorite fun fact about him is he had 10 children and all 10 of them became physicians, which is amazing. But what's cool about that story is the UMMC is still the one carrying on that tradition. Dr. Hall started to help edit the new editions of the book, and then his son is also now doing it, both UMMC doctors. So it's a really cool story, and it's one of our cool loaned objects too, is we have one of the original drawings for the textbook where the artist sketched it and they labeled it for the book to be scanned into the book for the first edition, which is really cool. And there's a video of Dr. Guyton, and one of the interesting things I think about Dr. Hardy is he was one of those that we knew we needed to put in the exhibit if we're talking about medical innovations. He's a huge one in terms of Mississippi. And off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure he's the only one we kind of talk about that doesn't have an artifact. But, Nan and I were able to work with them at UMMC. They have a lot of cool stuff. We ended up seeing the video of the first transplant when we were there, so a lot of cool stuff that didn't even make it to the exhibit, but that's one of my favorite ones. But it's a great example of ways in which we could go on and on and on about these topics, and I think that's what's fun about this exhibit, is that my hope is that you go in the exhibit and you find something that sparks your interest and you're able to explore that more within other MDH sites or archive or just research on your own.
It's a great kind of segue to this idea. Dr. Guyton is a prime example that museums are finite places. I look through as you walk through even our permanent exhibitions and think, we forgot this, we could add that. But you can't have a museum of everything. It's hard. It's really hard at making those decisions of what is going to go physically into the exhibit, whether that's language on a label or a wall or the physical item itself. And so because it can't make it all into an exhibit, tell us, what's that process for deciding? That's hard because you can't really point and say, oh, that's not deserving, because there's a lot of deserving things, but again, we're working with a finite amount of space, no matter what, whether it's the temporary or permanent exhibitions. But tell us just about Mississippi Made. What was that process like to select some of these objects and items?
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, the idea for this exhibit has been tossed around for longer than I've been at the department. And so a lot of people have had ideas about what it should be, what are the topics, what are the artifacts we might want to use. So when I started, I was pretty new in our historic object collection, and it was a great way for me to really dive into our collection and kind of learn it inside and out. But the good thing about Mississippi Made is we knew we wanted it to feature a lot of objects from our historic object collection. And so that is kind of the jumping off point we took, where we kind of set up these 4 zones and what kind of sections and what kind of topics might fit within those, and finding what stories and artifacts we have that we can put on display to talk about them. And then some of the stories that we knew we wanted to include, we sourced those, like the NASA's Stennis Space Center. We worked with them to get stuff stuff. That's like a big one that we knew we wanted. But so much of it is also just shaped by our historic object collection. And yeah, that's why when someone's like, why didn't you include this? It's like, because we don't have an artifact in our collection that represents it is largely the answer. And I think that beyond that, if we talk about, how did we pick certain things for the exhibit, like if we're going to talk about, the lumber industry, which turpentine cup are we going to use? Like, I think a lot of that comes down to what's going to be interesting to the visitor, what's going to be visually appealing, and what artifacts will best handle being on display. And sometimes it was just me picking my favorite one. Like, I'm thinking of the art. We have a folk artist, Willie Barton. We have a whole cabinet of his pieces. We have probably about 100 of them, of his wood carvings. And the one that we chose is my favorite one. So it's some of that.
And Jessica really did do an amazing job, because we had a lot of ideas for years just bouncing around as to what we wanted this exhibit to be. And Jessica just took those ideas and organized them and researched and chose the artifacts and just really did an amazing job making this exhibit come to life.
All right, so what are some of the things that got left on the chopping room floor that maybe we're missing the artifact and but it was a story we wish we could tell, or maybe we had it and just couldn't find room? Do you guys have a favorite or something that's kind of out there that you wish had gotten in?
I have so many. When we talked about doing this, thankfully we have a great team, and my problem is I have a lot of ideas, and I write a lot of text and all of that, and everyone else has to taper me in. So I had, tons of cool stories that would have been cool to feature. Like, we were talking about this morning, and there's a ton. Like, the founder of FedEx is from Mississippi. One that I was really interested in, there's an astronomer, Roy Tucker, I believe, and he discovered like 700 minor planets, and he's from Mississippi, which would have been awesome in our little space section. But again, we didn't have any contacts to reach out to his family or anything, and we don't have objects in our collection. So that's like one of those stories that's like, I would have loved to squeeze in there, and it would have fit really well. But and that's one of those kind of unknown ones. But there's endless amounts of artists we could have included, athletes, musicians. Like, there's just so many.
Do you have one, Ann?
Not one in particular,
Okay.
but we do have just amazing artifacts that I do wish could have gone in, if not here, could have gone in the permanent exhibits that just don't fit, we have better examples, or we just couldn't get them in there, or they just came in. So keep on signing up for our collections tours, the behind-the-scenes tours we offer quarterly, and you'll see more artifacts that didn't get in.
And that's what's great about doing, temporary exhibits. We're always changing our temporary exhibits, and we're able to pull from our collection to put new things on display that haven't been. Even when we have traveling exhibits that are, pre-made exhibits that come to us, we usually do a Mississippi component, so we're able to pull some things from our collection for the public to view as well. We're always looking for ways to share them.
And it's cool that not only is an exhibit like Mississippi Made an opportunity that we get to see some of those things that aren't on public display, but you guys do a regular rotation. You just did one this past Monday of putting objects, maybe similar stories that rotate through both the permanent collections in both the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. So if you're here enough, you can kind of start to pick and choose and see what new things start to pop up here and there. But that selection process, it's hard to begin with. But my mind, as I was walking through the exhibit for the first time, was we walked in to the art section. And where do you begin? You have a who's who of Mississippi artists that are filling the wall with their incredible art, from portraits to folk art to our quilting. It's incredible in that space. What are some of y'all's favorite pieces? Because that just walking into that section alone just feels overwhelming to where do you start here? And so I don't even want to ask what you couldn't choose, because that's too hard. There's probably more names than you'd like, but what are some of those favorite pieces that you walk in and you're like, yeah, this is a special piece to me?
I have a bunch, and the art section was really fun as a history person, as someone who does history exhibits, to kind of make my own little art exhibit was really fun and special. And we have a fair amount of pieces of art in our collection, largely folk art in our permanent collection, and we were able to work for this exhibit with the the Mississippi Museum of Art, and we have several pieces on loan from them. My personal favorites, or ones that might be kind of unexpected. If you've been in the exhibit, they're kind of in the back wall, so you have to kind of look for them. It's the pieces by Mary T. Smith and Loy Allen Bolin. They were both folk artists, self-taught artists, and what I really love about them is that they kind of really lived in their art in a way that I think is really special. They're not the, classically trained artists or anything like that. Mary T. Smith started painting in like her 80s, and she did a lot of work on everyday materials using like house paints and plywood and things like that. And her style just feels very unique. And if you like Google her home, her art like surrounded her fence, and it was all over her home, and like she really like lived in her art. And same with Loy Allen Bolin, who is the original rhinestone cowboy. He basically rhinestoned his entire life. His house walls, his car, his dentures, his glasses, everything. So we have a small piece that's very in his style, and it's like cardboard and glitter and like little sequins. So it's not like it's this art masterpiece, but I think that it's really cool in a way that like he was so original and lived in his art. So those are some of my favorites.
And we really do have an amazing art collection, which I think surprises people because we are a history museum, a history collection, but I do credit two people had a huge influence on the art in our collection, and one is Patty Carr Black, and the other is Roland Freeman. And Patty Carr Black, for those of you who aren't familiar with her, she was a longtime MDH employee. She was director of exhibits at the Old Capitol Museum, director of the Old Capitol Museum when it served as a state history museum. And she was very interested in folk art, started amassing a large folk art collection for us. And she was also head of the Mississippi Folklife Festival, and then the 1974 Smithsonian Folklife Festival, which featured Mississippi that year. So she organized that. And one of the pieces in the exhibit is a piece by Ethelwhite Mohammed showing that Folklife Festival on the National Mall. So you see the reflection pool and the Washington Monument, and then you see all the booths of the folk artists exhibiting there. And Miss Mohammed was a textile artist from Belzona, and she just sewed this whole festival, and it's an amazing piece. And then Roland Freeman was a collector of folklore stories, kind of a cultural anthropologist, but he traveled around Mississippi and the South in general, but Mississippi especially, and found primarily African-American folk artists, and was one of the first people to really document Black quilters. And he amassed for us a wonderful collection of quilts from African-American artists across the state. And one of those, probably the most prominent one, was Herdesine Rankin. And he met Miss Rankin when she was older. And when she was a child, her father was murdered. And she spent her life just trying to deal with that. And when she was older, she was still dealing with that trauma. And Roland Freeman encouraged her to use her quilting skills to put this story into a quilt, and that's exactly what she did. We have it hanging upstairs. It's called Memories of My Father's Death, and you see her father after he was shot by a white man just in the middle of the road, lying in the road. And then the companion piece of hers is After My Father's Funeral, which is on display in the Civil Rights Museum. So you can see both of those, and credit Roland for bringing them to us.
I would also add that the Ethelwhite Muhammad piece of the 1974 festival is a really cool one, and we have several pieces in our collection that were purchased from the festival. So a lot of artists, and there were artists and performers and everything from Mississippi, and our department was able to purchase some of the works for our collection, and two of those are actually in Mississippi made as well. The Sunford Thomas sculpture is one that we got from that festival, and the stickball sticks that are in the exhibit were also made by an exhibitor there. So I love that tie-in.
Nan, you touched on that reality that, for a history museum, and history institution, we have a lot of art. And so it just makes me think, our role at MDH, our mission is to preserve and to share, Mississippi's cultural resources. What role in y'all's experience in the museum field and here at MDH does art play in preserving and communicating our history here in the state?
I think it's really important because a lot of artists are storytellers, and so a lot of their work, is them telling the story of themselves or of what they're seeing, and so a lot of that ties into Mississippi as ways in which people are reflecting their experiences through art.
And yeah, and you see that through like our basketry. We have Choctaw baskets on display, so you can see the art that the Choctaw pour into their baskets, and quilts especially are just a wonderful way to get art into the history books. But art does imitate life, so it's a great way to show our history through the art.
I love that we have those quilts and how prominent not only they're seen throughout the exhibit upstairs, but also in the permanent exhibitions in Mississippi Civil Rights Museum and Museum of Mississippi History. But if you go down to the collection, I mean, y'all have drawers and drawers of more quilts that are down there.
225 in the collection.
Wow, 225 of those quilts, and thinking of the stories that those quilts bear, like Miss Rankin's story as well. As we kind of make your way through, you make your way from art and into entertainment, and this is, again, just like art, this is another who's who of Mississippians. One of the ones that you walk right into, you almost run into it as you're kind of walking past some of the Catherine Buchanan portraits of Richard Wright and others, is that Mary Ann Mobley dress. It's a kind of a central fixture right there. For folks that are maybe unfamiliar with Mary Ann Mobley's story, Nan, tell us a little bit who she was. How does her story fit into kind of this theme of Mississippi Made?
Well, Mary Ann Mobley was the first Miss America from Mississippi, and she became Miss America in 1959. And the very next year, she crowned Linda Lee Mead Miss America, who is also from Mississippi. So we have back-to-back Miss Americas, which was just a huge deal. We've only had 4 total in our history, so to have 2 back-to-back was amazing. But Mary Ann Mobley was one of the first Miss Americas to really take that crown and use it to propel her into her career. She became an actress. She was very popular. She was in movies with Elvis and TV shows, and just really took the fame that she got from that Miss America and launched her into her career, and she became really famous worldwide. But after she passed away, her daughter gave us her Miss Mississippi crown and her Miss America crown. And the day they came into the office, we were just so excited, and a staff member just put on some gloves, because we never touch anything barehanded, but put on some gloves, held the crown, and we just snapped a quick picture of it and threw it up on Facebook. And I think to this day, it is the most popular post MDH has ever had on Facebook. People just love Mary Ann Mobley. There's just something about her that just speaks to people. And the dress we have in the exhibit is the dress she wore on the night that she crowned Linda Lee Mead Miss America. So.
It's a cool kind of continuation of this story of Mississippi and its impact and influence on the nation. But it's not just the nation, Jessica, because if you walk around the corner after you pass the Mary Ann Mobley dress and you kind of begin to make your way out, you run into what I think, there are a lot of very precious and things that people would love to have. But there are 3 medals in that last case that are coveted across the world. And I'm talking about Ralph Boston's Olympic gold medal, bronze medal, and silver medal that are in that space. Jessica, only so many people in the history of the world have Olympic medals. And we've got 3 sitting upstairs, a gold, a silver, and a bronze. Tell me a little bit about how do we get these? Who is Ralph Boston to, and how do we end up with this incredibly precious artifact in this exhibit?
Yeah, Drew knows to ask me this because they're my favorite in the exhibit. Any time that we're talking about Mississippi Made, I'm going to talk about Ralph Boston. He's one of my specific interests. So we're really, really excited to have his medals and his shoes that he wore to win the gold medal in 1960. Ralph Boston is from Laurel, Mississippi. He was a long jumping athlete. He went to Tennessee State University and competed there. And he went on to compete in 3 Olympics, won 3 medals, gold in 1960, silver in 1964, and bronze in 1968. He's the first man to jump over 27 feet in the long jump. Huge athlete, big star. And we've been really lucky that their family has reached out and worked with us. The medals and his shoes are on loan from their family, and they've been really wonderful to work with. And you know, they came to the opening of the exhibit and everything. That was super special. So yeah, those are my personal ones. If anyone wants to talk about Ralph Boston ever, I'm the one to do it.
It's so cool to me that a young man from Laurel, Mississippi, has a gold medal that is full of a laurel wreath on it, and to have that piece and to have it in that collection is great. Tell us, because we worked with their family to have that. What was their reaction when, you know, this got in the exhibit? Because I'm sure that, you know, is this the first time it's been on display? Has it been elsewhere?
I don't think so. Yeah, we had a huge amount of their family come, worked specifically with one of Boston's nieces, and he, you know, Ralph Boston was one of 10 children, and he has one brother that's still alive, and he was able to come, which was super special. And right across from the medals in the exhibit is the Wheaties box with Walter Payton, and Ralph Boston's brother, you know, was like, oh yeah, he was my, I coached his high school team. So like he kind of came in and made that instant connection to another person in the exhibit, which was super cool. But that's really nice for us in working in collections, is when we're able to meet these families and learn from them, and get to share these artifacts.
Looking back at this entire process, Nan, starting years and years ago with the concepts and the ideas, what was going to happen, one, what were some of those biggest challenges, some of those big hurdles that it takes to have a project, an exhibit like this come to life? And then two, what were some of those just kind of most meaningful moments that, you know, again, all the hard work, the late nights, I don't think people quite realize that y'all were often up here until, you know, 9, 10, later at night working, long after weekends, as Drew shouts, of being here. There's a lot of energy and effort that goes into this. So what were some of those biggest challenges? And then two, what were some of those most meaningful moments that made it all worth it?
So definitely one of the challenges, especially when you've got an exhibit of this size and the number of artifacts in there and the number of large artifacts in there, is to figure out how you're going to get everything in and when you're going to get everything in. And Sam Butts and our exhibits team just kind of figured out, all right, first we have to get those cars in there. So the Nissan and the Toyota had to come in first before anything went in, because they have to come through the back door and go through the exhibit space and in. So we knew we had to get those in. We knew we had to get the Lindsay wagon next, because it also came through the back door, had to go through that space, and then they started building. Drew and Sam and John all just started building the exhibit from there, putting up the walls. But it was a detailed process of what's going to go in where, and we've got to put this artifact in before we get this artifact in, and it really just took an amazing amount of organization from our exhibit staff to figure all of that out, the complexities of all of that.
Yeah, I know Hannah especially, I'd give her a shout out to designing this. You know, she was given a huge project too, and, you know, thousands of square foot of space, and she's the one who had to figure out how we can lay it out, how it's going to flow, and all of that stuff. And so she had a really big part in that as well.
And one thing I will say, that one of my favorite moments of this process was when the Toyota came. And y'all, those people from the Toyota plant they have been working months on this. They were so excited to contribute. If you haven't been up to the mezzanine, we have it on display. It's a Corolla. It was made up in the Blue Springs plant, and half of it's finished and half of it has a clear plexi barrier across of it, so you can see inside to the inner workings of the car. But they were so excited to bring it, and we just have a picture of them loading it into the freight elevator in the back and bringing it up to the exhibit and moving it in. So it's a lot of fun just to see the community as a whole, through them, like kind of get excited about this exhibit. And it's always fun to see how people react to the exhibits. So like the Boston family on opening night was amazing, but also just to kind of step back, because we have been there working. Well, I wasn't personally, Drew and them were working late nights and weekends, but to put this amount of work for years into this exhibit and on opening night, just be able to kind of step back and watch people interact with it. And then the history happy hour we had a couple weeks ago that was so well attended, and your team had a great trivia questions that related to the exhibit. So people had to go into the exhibit and interact with it to get the trivia answers, and watching people do that, it just really makes it all worth it. So.
What about you, Jessica? What were some of those challenges along the way and that most meaningful moment?
I mean, for me personally, like I already mentioned, I'm bad at, I get into research, and I want to give every fun fact that I have on the labels. And, you know, we have finite spaces to do so. And so that's really good when we have team members that can kind of rein me in. But that, and then, you know, we have a lot of really large artifacts in this exhibit. You know, I think, you know, people might be surprised that we got the Toyota Corolla up for 4 stories in the building, and things like that was a fun organizational challenge. Same with the Lindsay wagon, and Drew helped us move some big things. The 1887 loom, Drew helped us move, and so. We had a lot of that, and Katie, our conservator, did a lot of work with prepping the artifacts for display, making sure everything is ready for exhibit. She worked really hard on a lot of the artifacts as well.
It's really incredible the size of some of those pieces that we have, you know, this high up. Most people don't realize that we're currently kind of now on the 3rd floor as it is. We have 2 floors of collection space beneath us here. But as we start to kind of wrap up, we want to kind of go to Q&A here in just a moment. But I just want to say congratulations again, guys. This, as you kind of look this image behind us, you kind of have a beginning of the wireframe of Hannah in the early days of what this created looked like digitally, and quite literally the progression from this Welty picture on a digital picture to actually being on the wall, to guest finally being in this and seeing kind of a quick kind of step of how we go from one to the other. But there's so much work that goes into it in between. And so just again, congratulations. Let's give our curatorial team a round of applause. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A. And so if you've got a question, Brittany is going to make her way around the room with a microphone. And we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A.
Okay. Very nice. I've been upstairs, and it's very interesting. Our question is, I didn't remember seeing, was Coca-Cola that was created in Vicksburg, was it green at first?
Oh, the bottles?
No, the liquid.
Oh, I have no.
Okay, Google,
I have no
and then
idea.
go to different, okay. Also, and Drew, you mentioned that you ate peaches. Okay, that reminded me of, and you said chitterlings.
Yep.
They say I say it too perfect. I'm from the north. But I remember reading there was a black American gentleman that took chitterlings over to England. I don't recall the year. And it's on the 5-star restaurant menu, and it's called wrinkled steaks. And he's a multi-millionaire. Also, what part of AI did you use? And have you ever considered or looked into holograms? Because over in Japan, a lot of their car dealerships, they do not have physical cars there. Thank you.
That is beyond our technical ability here. That would be awesome. Maybe we'll get there eventually. As far as AI, it's not really something we use, especially for me. I prefer to do my own research, my own writing. So that doesn't really play into our process still.
Congratulations, Nan and Jessica, on the exhibit. It's absolutely wonderful. But I keep thinking about it was a very big deal in 1987, and have you all reached out or considered to reach out to this family? Tony C. Wright was the first African-American Miss Mississippi, and it was a very big deal. Has her crown been donated, or has anyone tried to contact the family?
We do not have anything from her. And I don't think we've had contact with the family, at least not in a while. But if you have that information, I'll get it from you.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we're always like, yeah, we unfortunately don't, but if you have a connection, get in touch with us. We're happy to reach out.
Thank you. Let me jog your historical memory for a bit. The name Eli Whitney is associated with the cotton gin. His name is known as made the cotton gin in Natchez in 1795, somewhere around there. 1790s is known for that. But also a slave is also associated with the making of the cotton gin, which of course has such tremendous economic impact on the cotton industry, not only the Mississippi, but the entire United States. And I'm wondering, and of course, slaves in those days were not given they're not even recognized as people. But that, since the 13th Amendment and 14th Amendment, slaves have become people. So I was wondering if something could be done about those products that were made by slaves could in some way be recognized for the value that they gave to the economic condition in Mississippi.
I can tell you one of the things that we actually had a previous program is the story of Ned, a enslaved gentleman, and his patent was essentially stolen by the man that owned him. And you can find that back from, I believe it was a June 6th History's Lunch that we did. But that reality, that piece of how we try and tell these stories with pieces that are missing and trying to find, you'll notice if you've been into the Museum of Mississippi History, as we try and tell that story of many of these products, and truly the foundation of so much of Mississippi's economic wealth and success during the antebellum period, and that there are those names that are missing. We talk about it from an interpretation standpoint. These are the intentional silences in archives, and we do especially everything we can to try and address those silences. And I think that's a space that, as you mentioned, Dr. Daniels, of finding ways to improve upon. And so absolutely.
Thank you for all of your information. I'm concerned, is this a traveling exhibit or is it stationary upstairs? And
It's not traveling. It's just upstairs.
for how long? Is that a permanent?
For how long, did you ask?
Right. It's a
Until
permanent
November
exhibit.
6th.
Ma'am,
November 6th.
November 6th?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hi, guys. How did you get the B.B. King jacket, and did you have to pay for any of these things that you got? What's
The BB King suit jacket and the guitar, we have assigned BB King Lucille in the exhibit. Those are on loan from the BB King Museum and Delta Interpretive Center. They were really great to work with. We just reached out to them, and we're like, we're going to talk about Mississippi musicians when we have to talk about BB King. Again, in our collection, we don't have anything, that he owned or anything. We have like some small things like a guitar pick and stuff, and we wanted something more significant. So we were able to work with them, and they were really gracious and easy to work with. And we did not pay for any, I don't think. There was one where we might have had to but it didn't work out that way.
Like a packing
Yeah,
loan
sometimes
fee,
we
but-
you had to pay shipping and things like that. But most institutions are really great about sharing artifacts and getting them to new places.
Hey, this was great. Could you identify some of the institutions outside of the state of Mississippi that loaned pieces that are going to be on display?
Yeah. So I mentioned the Center for Puppetry Arts, where we got the Muppet and Jim Henson's shoes. The shoes are his design, so he drew on them. They're his shoes. They're from there. We have several pieces from the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum in Nashville. So we have the Elvis bathrobe, the Conway Twitty outfit, Tammy Wynette. So they also have a really great collection that we were able to pull from. And the other one I'm thinking of is the Hagley Museum in Delaware. They are actually the ones that have the nystatin samples. So nystatin is a antifungal invented by a Mississippian while she was working for the state of New York. But they have her original lab samples, and we were able to work with them to get them. So, things like the puppet and the artifacts from Nashville, we were able to drive and get, but the samples were able to be mailed to us, so that was really helpful.
Well, as we wrap up, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to tell you that as you make your way out, you'll see Sarah Ellison is with the Mississippi Library Commission. If you didn't know, that they have the Patent and Trademark Office over at the Mississippi Library Commission. And so if you're curious, some of the actual original patents for some of the artifacts that are upstairs are with the Mississippi Library Commission. And so if you'd like to have some more information, Sarah will be out there and be happy to answer questions and provide some educational materials. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Brittany.
All right, let's give a round of applause to our people. All right, thank you again, Nan, Jessica, and Drew. Don't forget to join us next week for History's Lunch with Randy Deaton and his presentation, Art Crimes, the FBI, and the Return of a Mississippi Rifle. Thank y'all. Have a great day.